The hype around Clair Obscur Expedition 33 was pretty crazy. It's still pretty crazy. We have reviewers saying it's the greatest RPG since Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VII, or 10, or whatever. Some people saying this is the greatest RPG of all time. We've had people saying, you know what? I hate turn-based games, but I love Expedition 33. High praise pretty much everywhere you look. Now, we just recently got the Game of the Year nominees announced, and Expedition 33 found a way in there in practically every single category, sometimes multiple times within the same category even. So what's the deal with this game? Does it really live up to all of this hype? Long story short, yeah, it does. End of video. You guys can go. No, I'm just kidding. Don't leave yet. But alright, let's get one thing straight here. I'm not one of those people that would go as far as to say that nothing compares to the game. I don't even think that it really does that many new things. Rather, it takes a lot of inspiration from other games within the genre and mixes them together in a way that's just a lot of fun to play. That said, the game is absolutely not without issues. So yeah, let's give Expedition 33 a fair breakdown here. I will say, right off the bat, the intro to the game is instantly engaging. We take the reins of Gustave, a pretty likable protagonist, and it's in his shoes that we learn about the city of Lumiere and the depressing fate that awaits all of its inhabitants. We witness our first gommage as the paintress writes down her next number. Every year it goes down one digit, and people of that age vanish from existence. The people of Lumiere do attempt to fight back, every year sending out an expedition in an attempt to defeat the paintress and end the suffering, but so far, no good. Gustave and his teammates in Expedition 33 hope to finally end this cycle. The lore that is set up here is great. The tone of the game is dark and tragic. I'm here for all of this. It's a fantastic premise for a story. What happens immediately after the expedition embarks is also very shocking and exciting. I'll leave out the finer details for now, but I'll just leave it at this. Something other than the paintress seems to be attacking the expeditioners. Lune is our first party member to join, and she finds Gustave in a rather dire situation. Gustave ready to end it all, feeling like he was lost and alone in the world. And this part is brilliantly directed, the voice work is fantastic, it's a great scene. Then the story dials back as you spend a little time learning the actual feel of the gameplay, the controls, the turn-based combat, the dodging, and the parries, and all of that. Gustave is focused on finding Maëlle, while Lune wants to stick to the mission and follow some dumb protocol. Lune she's a really good character, but I gotta say, I wasn't the biggest fan of her until way later on. She's gorgeous and one of the wiser characters in the party, but I couldn't help but find her just a little boring early on. I guess that was my main issue with the party members in Act 1. They don't get very much time to show off what makes them tick, their backstories. A lot of that shows up eventually, but in this part of the game, instead, everyone seems focused on the task at hand. I mean, Gustave and Maëlle are clearly stealing the show in Act 1. Maëlle is a great character throughout the whole story. She is essentially Gustave's adopted daughter, coming along with the expedition because, well, there's just not a lot for her to do in Lumiere. Luckily, she's found safe and alive after the attack, but she starts having these nightmares. Those are clearly important, but like a lot in this game, you gotta give it time before they will make sense. Ciel is our last human party member, and she has a much more forward personality than Lune. I like her upbeat attitude, but again, we don't get to know a whole lot about any of these characters just yet. There is a camp mechanic, think kind of like Dragon Age or Baldur's Gate, but it's not expanded upon enough early on for you to do much with outside of upgrading some weapons until way later in the game. And even then, there's not a ton of meat on the bones there. I still love the camp mechanics anyway, though. You can eventually unlock some romance options with Lune and Ciel. Sorry, Monaco fans. But again, they're locked out until Act 3, and while I understand why, maybe that was a factor in me not feeling very attached to these party members early on. But still, even in the later acts, the social aspects aren't as fleshed out as like Mass Effect or something. I think my biggest issue with characters like Lune and Ciel, they don't really develop very much. The way they are when you meet them is pretty much the same come the end of the game. I mean, remove Ciel from the narrative and nothing really changes. I think I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here though. The world is beautiful, albeit visually confusing at times. The world is also somewhat juvenile, and that will make sense later on in the game, but we're working with a world mostly inhabited by monsters called Nevrons, and paintbrush-looking creatures called Jestrels. The humans, expeditioners of the past, well, they're all dead, so don't go in thinking there will be very many different towns or villages along the journey to see. The Jestrels do have a village, pretty much the most lively area in the game. It's got a silly, kind of funny vibe to it. The main thing these guys like doing is fighting. They're obsessed with it. Jestrels are fun, kind of dumb. It's good stuff. This part is a bit reminiscent of Nier Automata, in my opinion. Kind of reminded me of the peaceful robot village, and I like it. But the game does little to explain the whys of its world until so much later on that you just kind of have to accept the weird world at face value for a lot of the game. It's here we run into our fourth party member, who I was just mentioning, Seal. And like I was saying before, she's got a little bit more of a light-hearted personality. I do like the girl. I like Luné as well. It just feels like they could have done more with them. Anyway, like I was saying, the tone is a little weird in this section of the game. We're clearly still going on a death pilgrimage. We're encountering failed expeditions, and yet everything is just kind of goofy feeling. Well, except for Mael's nightmare scenes. These are really interesting. There's also a shroud of mystery veiled over everything, with new questions coming to you before the game answers any of the last ones. It's around this point I was starting to wonder if all the hype was maybe a bit overblown. This wasn't feeling like the greatest game I have ever played. Don't get me wrong, I was having fun and everything, but the game wasn't blowing my mind or anything. This unseriousness doesn't last for much longer. Mael's dreams start getting more dramatic. It's here we see the white-haired man again. Looks more salt and pepper, but this guy is clearly bad news. Things start getting really heavy again. You can actually skip ahead to the time posted on screen right now if you haven't beaten Act 1 yet, so here's your chance. You got like 2 seconds to do so. At the end of the act, after a very exciting boss battle, the expedition is attacked by that salt and pepper man, Renoir, the same guy that attacked and killed most of the expedition team in the intro. He's back, and he murders Gustave. Gustave doesn't go down without putting up a fight, but Renoir is simply too powerful. I was shocked, but we're also left even more confused. What is his connection to Mael? Who was that girl that Mael saw in these visions she's been having? And who is this new guy that sounds like Clive Rossfield? Why is he saving our ass here? I gotta say, I was definitely caught off guard, mostly at how early this happens. I thought it was pretty obvious that we were setting up to pass the torch to Mael at some point in the game. It's just, we know so little about what's actually going on that, yeah, it just seemed a bit earlier than I had theorized in my head. I was thinking maybe as a good endgame twist, he'd have to sacrifice himself for those who come after, you know. But this is much more interesting, at least in my opinion. I love the twist. That said, I've seen some people saying this was a turning point for the worse, that they no longer felt like playing after Gustave's death, and when Verso enters the picture. I don't know, guys. You really didn't see that coming? Gustave is a good guy. Too good of a guy. Good guys don't make it. And all that journaling for those who come after? Come on. The dude had absolutely no shot of making it to the end of the story. I'm just surprised it happened so early. But also, don't hate me for saying this either, but he's just not that developed enough of a character for me to be quitting the game over either. Which again is, I guess, my main problem with Act 1 in general. Things happen, and the things are interesting, but I wasn't attached to any of our party members at this point. Mael was growing on me for sure, but yeah, I've heard people being brought to tears here, and I guess for me I was more shocked than sad, but I did feel bad that this is where his story ends. I guess in the aftermath of his death, there's that scene with Mael and Esquier. Yeah, that's pretty sad. So if that made you cry, I guess, yeah, I get that. Admittedly, the way that Verso squeezes his way into the picture also does feel a bit odd, especially the way that he won't tell us a damn thing, yet we also control him in the camp. It is strange, but it certainly didn't kill the story for me. But I can definitely understand the criticism around his introduction here. Now, I will quickly throw out that on a second playthrough, Act 1 makes a lot more sense, and I appreciate a lot more with the additional context from, well, the upcoming Act 2 twist. It's almost like a second watch of like Fight Club or something, where you notice things and go, oh, so that's why that was there, or that's why the little mystery ghost spirit boy says that weird thing there. Going forward from the big Act 1 plot twist, everything that comes after, I was way more into. The party members start giving you more to be invested in. The world starts to actually make sense in how little it makes sense. The stakes get higher and higher. The emotions get more tense as we learn how Verso relates to Renoir and Mayel. And after a pretty big gameplay-heavy stretch of the game, that's when the expedition finally reaches the Paintress. Even more great plot twists, and I loved all of this. The final act, the different endings, it was amazing, and I love that there's a little darkness to both endings. I know that some people don't like the last big plot twist. They think that it makes Act 1 and 2 feel pointless, and I won't get too into that here other than saying that I disagree. Now, you might notice that I'm being a little bit more vague than I was when talking about Act 1, but that's on purpose. I really don't want to spoil the ending or even really the ending of Act 2. So I would really just say, give it a chance because the story takes a turn for, I think, the better. There are a few things that are a little weird about it, sure, but I mean, I really loved it. My complaint about Lune and like the other party members not really mattering quite as much as like the main couple, yeah, that's still kind of present even towards the end of the game. Maybe it's even worse in the last act of the game. But it's something I can look past because the total package is just really good. But the pacing definitely isn't perfect. The game leaves you in the dark for a little too long, pretty much all the way until you reach the end of Act 2. But as I was saying earlier, it does make for an interesting second playthrough. Another issue I have with the pacing is the structure of Act 3 in general. The shocking reveals are great, but afterward you are faced with the option of either rushing to the final boss or exploring some additional side content first. The big main fight is appropriate to take on pretty much right away, so that's the route that I took, and that leads to the ending choices, both of which are heavy decisions to make, and I can support the arguments for either ending. But a couple of those optional side quests really help add context to the ending, as well as cover some actual big loose endings that you might be left wondering about if you go straight to the final boss. A couple of these moments honestly do belong in the main story, so narratively, they should happen first. But doing them first makes you way too overpowered for the final fight. There's just no way to go through it in a natural order that feels right. Anyway, let's get back to the main point that I'm saying here about the story. And that's that, for me anyway, that the game was more of a slow burn. I didn't immediately fall in love with the characters or even the world, but I was won over by the end. Another aspect of the game that I felt similarly about was, well, the actual gameplay. I love turn-based RPGs. I also love action RPGs, but the way that the parries and dodges are implemented into this game felt really rough for me, at least in the beginning. The parry window feels really tricky. Now, admittedly, I am not the best when it comes to twitchy reaction type games. I guess Stellar Blade was the last big, parry heavy action game that I played, but I was struggling way more with Expedition 33 than I think I was with that. Dodging, at least, is a bit more forgiving, but it's also far less rewarding as you lose out on that huge counter damage, which, yeah, I gotta admit, these do feel sick as hell when pulled off. Both parries and even the dodges can be frustrating as you learn the enemy patterns, especially because these enemies really like to fake you out with little jerky movements before finally attacking. Audio cues become extremely helpful if you struggle with the visual timing, but just wait until the game starts faking you out with those too. Then you're really in for it. This leads to my main issue with the early game. Parry is just so freaking overpowered compared to anything else you can do. I was a little worried that the gameplay would become a little bit of a one-trick pony. Dodge, parry, or die. A turn-based Elden Ring, or I guess Sekiro more accurately. And that's fine. That's just not usually what I'm looking for when I'm playing a turn-based RPG. I want a variety of strategies, different builds, team mechanics, buffs, status effects, maybe a good gear system, stuff like that. I'm not usually looking to be getting my ass beat until I memorize the enemy combo patterns. Luckily, once you put a few hours into the game, you will start finding more interesting weapon builds, you'll be finding more interesting pictos that buff specific attacks or abilities, you'll unlock better skills, you'll get further down on your skill trees so you can start applying marks, maybe make a cool critical hit build. You can start stacking burns for devastating in-between turn damage and more. Exactly the kind of stuff that I was hoping for. Each character plays really differently too, so I definitely came around to the battle system here. Sure, there will still be a few encounters where, if you don't learn to dodge, well, you're done for. Obviously, that mechanic stays very important until the end of the game. But the best defense is a strong offense, so who cares about dying in a few hits if you can get the enemy down faster? By the end game, I think I was liking the combat even more. The skill trees and weapon builds open up a lot, and I even came around to appreciate the parry system for what it is. And once you remove that damage cap, you can come up with some absolutely devastating endgame builds. Your characters do insane damage, crazy things like apply hundreds of burn stacks, take extra turns on top of turns. You can make a free aim machine gun build, all kinds of fun ways to try and break the game. That said, I've seen some wild takes around this battle system, as if it makes all other turn-based games obsolete now. But again, I get it. Especially these days, it seems like people are really into challenging gameplay. I like it too, but I don't need every game to be super frustrating to have a good time. For what it's worth, I think Clair Obscur is pretty right on as far as the difficulty goes. There are some really challenging optional fights, but the main story felt pretty good to me. The last optional boss fight is way too much, but that's the only thing in the game that I thought was straight up unfair, and even then, I think you can be cheaper than he is if you set up the exact right pictos. Screw that guy though. I'm getting a little distracted here. I do like the combat, but I don't want to see a bunch of copycats. Although given the game's critical reception and successful sales, I'm sure it will be inevitable that we get more of these turn-based but Sekiro-style games. I can't wait to see more turn-based games from the actual developers. I'm sure they will follow it up with something equally awesome. Moving on from gameplay, let's talk visuals a little bit. Expedition 33 is a good-looking game for the most part, but it shows some cracks here and there, little things like mouths not being animated when characters talk while you're exploring, stuff like that. While not really a big deal, it does remind you that the game didn't have the biggest budget in the world. The art style is pretty cool though. It almost has a painted aesthetic to it. Things are very surreal, almost dreamlike at times. Gravity makes no sense whatsoever. The overworld is relatively simple to look at, but it's fun to navigate and definitely reminiscent of the PlayStation 1 era RPGs that it takes inspiration from. That said, the environments can sometimes suffer for just how surreal things are. While the maps themselves are simple, there end up being quite a lot of different branching pathways that end up looking really similar, and the lack of any map system while you're exploring is definitely not my favorite design choice. Now, if they wanted to go no map to incentivize exploration, that would be cool. But the exploration here is not that good. There are invisible walls everywhere, terrain is weird and goes by its own rules. Sometimes you can climb on stuff, sometimes you can't. Jumping sucks, and sometimes there just aren't any interesting landmarks to help keep you oriented. And don't even get me started on the platforming. At least most of it's optional, but the platforming in this game is actually pretty fucking ass. Various pictos are scattered across the map to encourage exploring every nook and cranny, but I had to backtrack to find a few, and without the internet and fan-made guides, well, I would have had to just accept my loss there. The characters themselves look really good, outside of an occasional goofy facial expression here and there. We get a decent amount of different costumes and hairstyles to play around with. Most of them aren't as cool as the characters' defaults, but it's nice to have some variety, and it's cool that they affect the cutscenes as well. I also like that all of these are acquired in-game, not just thrown in there for a few extra DLC dollars. The character models are all detailed and expressive, but one tiny complaint. Is it just me, or are the heads a little too big? Verso in particular looks kinda silly in my opinion, but it's not a huge thing. Just kinda bugged me a little bit. Moving on to something that deserves 100% of the praise. The soundtrack is really damn good. Every great RPG needs a strong soundtrack to accompany its powerful moments, and luckily the developers remembered that. The game experiments in genres I'd not expect, like sudden ripping guitar solos and vocals in some of the tracks, and there's a lot to love here. There are a few different motifs that show up in different places throughout the game, like that one Lumiere theme that shows up just about everywhere. That one will get stuck in my head, then at a certain point it just kinda turns into This is Halloween. This is Halloween. And the next thing you know, I've got Nightmare Before Christmas going through my head. Maybe I've just been playing way too much Kingdom Hearts. Expedition 33 has also been getting a lot of attention for its fantastic voice acting. The main cast, they're all great and really help heighten the tension in many of the dramatic moments. I can't think of a single complaint I have here. Jennifer English and Ben Starr stand out obviously, but every character is great. So, yeah, let's go back to the main question here. Does Expedition 33 live up to all of this hype? I would say, again, yeah, it does. I'm not in the camp that thinks this is the greatest game of all time, but fuck it, you know what? I guess it is a masterpiece. It may be top 10, but I'd really have to think on that. Best of 2025? Oh, yeah, probably. I really didn't play enough of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I gotta get back into that one. I think that Expedition 33 will most likely sweep the Game Awards. But even if it doesn't, it's a great game, and I'd recommend it to most RPG fans. The game's not flawless, but the story is top-notch, and the two different endings really stick with you for a while. I couldn't stop thinking about the game after I beat it. I can't wait to see what's next from Sandfall. Maybe we'll see the world of Clair Obscur expanded upon in future titles. Maybe they'll do something completely different. But before I finish up here, this is one aspect that rightfully gets a lot of attention. Expedition 33 was made by a small team. Perhaps the number gets exaggerated as to just how small, but there's no doubt that this was a lower budget title than something like The Witcher 4 or Grand Theft Auto 6 or whatever. The game released at just $50 with no paid DLC, and for a 2025 release, that's respectable in its own right. People are sick of getting screwed over by these big companies and their greedy business practices, so to see a relatively small developer succeed in the current gaming environment, I mean, you love to see it. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Would you hit the like button for me? And please let me know what you guys thought about Expedition 33. Is this the best RPG ever? Or what?